Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am BorderWise and welcome back to From the Depths, Weird and Wonderful, which is going to be a little different from the usual Weird and Wonderful we do, where we just usually gush over the craft in question. Today we're gushing over it, but also critiquing it a bit, because it's a guide. It is the Defense Concept Guide by Meme Machine 86. It's on the front page of the workshop, and I thought, ooh, this is interesting. And this isn't weird at all. This is definitely not the first helpful fortress that's been put up on the workshop. It is wonderful because it is a helpful fortress put on the workshop. I love it when people do things like this, and it's just putting yourself out there. Basically, because it's what I do all the time on this YouTube channel. It's putting yourself out there, it's sharing the things you've found, the ways to play this very, very difficult game, and quite frankly, it's awesome that people do this, so thank you, Meme Machine. Already you are being incredibly helpful in helping people enjoy this wonderful game. So, generally, this fortress is pretty on point with everything it suggests about defense and From the Depths. There's just a few nitpicks, but we'll go through it piece by piece. Reading from the workshop page, this guide will explain many different ways to defend your vehicle. It is for beginners and intermediate players, so I'm definitely not a beginner, and I have no idea what intermediate even is in From the Depths. How many hours of play is that? Does that mean you've beaten the campaign? Does that mean you've started adventure mode? Does that mean you've been in a tournament? What does that even mean? This game defies categorization, so let me know in the comments, what intermediate FTD even is. It has a written explanation and a physical example for each concept. All of these concepts have been proven in many battles and are very useful. So, and I see from the workshop page that Meme Machine has also made the Obamium Pyramid, so that is something I'm going to have to check out later as well. So, let's review this handy-dandy fortress and see what it does right, what it does wrong, and I don't know, that, basically. Alright, so to start off with, we're over here in the middle. Meme Machine's defense concepts. We're going to start over on this side of the fortress with the arguably more simple stuff. So let's start with spaced armor. So, over here, heat shells can be deadly to your vehicles, especially your battleship's guns and that tank you tried to make. Wow, stop spying on me, Meme Machine. You would not believe how many ships you could take out with this tiny gun right here. By shooting turrets. The best way to combat this is to use spaced armor. Heat damage passes through huge amounts of armor blocks and exits whenever a gap in the block is reached. Simply having no block will work, but that is not space efficient. Using wedges is the best way to create gaps in armor. As long as there is a visible space, it will stop heat shells. My favorite block to use is the pole, which will create gaps in anything except directly in front of it. If this gun hit it head on, it will penetrate. Remember that these gaps simply cause the heat damage to exit prematurely and do not delete it. If enough damage is dealt to these gap blocks, they will be destroyed. So that's, interesting enough, that is all correct. But not too long ago, the note about poles would have been incorrect, because, just so everyone's aware, poles in From the Depths are, they're not exactly perfect circles. If you zoom way in, let me get out me binoculars. You'll see that it is actually just a collection of flat surfaces because, curves are very difficult to render, in a 3D computer program in general. And in ye olde days, before they were updated, that point right there would have not counted as an air gap, which means that heat jets could penetrate through them. I believe that has been changed as of a few updates ago, so thankfully, Meme Machine is absolutely correct with that. Whether poles are the best air gap filler is debatable. The consensus in the community seems to be that beam slopes are the best thing for that, because heat shells can... It's not just that they reach through armor, it's that the fragments are, really damaging. So this one is not particularly big. How big is this heat shell? It's 179 millimeters, so if we go here, 179, so the heat shells only do about 868 damage, but if they get much bigger, they can do 3,000, a lot of damage, and this is not as damaging as heat shells can get. which means that to minimize the damage that the fragments do once it hits an air gap, it's helpful to ensure that the fragments spread out so they don't all hit one block, or at the very least that they don't hit all the exact same spot, which is why beam slopes tend to be the thing that people use these days, because if you look at the pole, the fragments don't really spread out much at all. Yes, the pole has more health, but pretty much all those fragments are going to hit the one block. Slopes are slightly better in that regard, except right at the bottom, because they don't have any room to spread out there. Wedges, kind of similar story, but also not really. And these little 1 meter wedges don't have really enough health to stop a full heat blast, especially a big one. And these big fellas are best for front-siders. More on that in a little bit, because they just do take up a lot of, you know, forward-facing room. Vertical room? Horizontal room? So beam slopes tend to be the best of, like, air gap filler, because they spread it out nice and neatly, they have a nice amount of health, and they're reasonably consistent with how much of an air gap they make. So poles are fine. If you want to use poles, they're great. But beam slopes generally better, and I can tell from experience through building things like battleships like the Tungsten Slung and the Drachenslung is that heavy armor beam slopes backed by alloy with however much armor thickness in front of them you like, that's damn good armor, and will stand up to most things, at least for a short time. So, but let's interact with this. So you can see there that got stopped, and it got stopped quite nicely. And you can see here that that little shell right there took about 30% health off this heavy armor slope. So yeah, heat can get through eventually. This isn't foolproof, but it is very good. So well done, Mean Machine. Good armoring there. So, now, shields. Spelt funny, but you know, again, the English language is awful. Shields ricochet enemy shells and reduce laser AP. Placing a shield is good, but making it have an angle is better. The steeper the angle that the shell hits it at, the better. Angling shields doesn't do anything to lasers. Sloped armor is a thing in this game, but it is not very good. The meta is to use HE weapons, which ignore sloped armor, and kinetic weapons are rarely used, so do not worry about sloping your armor. This also has a good example of the armor that the hull of your ship would have. I use metal, but alloy is better than metal in every way except health, so when using alloy, use a lot of layers. This is not entirely correct. The note about the shields is correct. Mean Machine doesn't actually mention how shields are improved with that. For anyone wondering, what is improved is the deflection chance. So, projectile reflects max chance. That is when the hit is almost parallel to the shield. The minimum chance is when the hit is perpendicular, so angling a shield steeply puts the value somewhere between that, hopefully closer to the max value. That's what makes them better. Also to note, with shield projectors, is that they reduce the damage that plasma does. So this is pretty much the only way to effectively defend against plasma with some kind of active defense. So yeah, like, energy projectors are just really good, and they keep getting better all the time, or so it seems. That's all good and correct, it's just some things left out. The note about sloped armor is just wrong. Sloped armor on the outside of your craft is kind of not particularly helpful, but internal sloped armor is very, very important, and the fact that kinetic weapons are rarely used is just wrong. Sorry. So Mean Machine is apparently not run into late game craft like the I don't know, like the Singularity or the Pyre, for instance. So I'm just gonna hop on the Pyre and show you what kind of kinetic weapons you might very well run into if you're playing through the Niter campaign, for instance. So where are we? We're gonna go over here. So over here we have the Pyre, which is actually a good demonstration of two things. Firstly, how ridiculously strong internal sloped armor is. 4-meter wedges, particularly heavy armor wedges, are the best kind of kinetic damage reduction you can get in the game because they reduce it by a lot. I forget how much, but it is a lot. Kinetic shells hitting a wedge get their damage reduced by a considerable amount, which means they don't penetrate as far. That is a big deal. And secondly, up to a certain point, that's basically the only way to reduce the kinetic damage of incoming shells when things like this are getting shot at you. This is a railgun. Is it a railgun? I'm pretty sure it actually isn't. Never mind. So this is essentially the main guns on the Pyre. It has a bunch of main weapons, actually. So these shells are too fast to dodge for the most part. It's 1,800 meters per second. They do 7,000 kinetic damage, and they have an armor value of 80 because it is a large gauge sabot shell. This is very hard to stop, so if you want to reduce this kinetic damage to the point that it doesn't punch a hole straight through you, and it will do that, I speak from bitter experience combat testing against the Pyre. This thing is magnificent to combat test. Not only to test the survivability of your craft, because this thing really chucks a lot of different damage types against you, but also whether your armor and your active defenses can stand up to these shells. 7,000 isn't that big a deal. It's like taking out multiple metal blocks, but armor pierce of 80, that does full damage to heavy armor, and pretty much the only way to reduce this, or to even deflect it without using shield projectors, is to use internal sloped armor. So sloped armor is very, very important in the late game, at the very least, when you are running up against things like this, and it gets even worse when they have railguns. So things like the Empyrean, which is this fellow over here, won't spawn it in because it's big and fat. That has some nasty, nasty kinetic railguns on it. And if you do not take care to reduce incoming kinetic damage, it will kill you. So, that's just wrong, sorry. HE damage is not the meta at all. Really strong kinetic weapons are. Also, the use of alloy seems to be controversial in the FTD hive mind. Metal is more resource efficient for both health and armor. And it actually does make a big difference in, like, in my experiences with From the Depths, like, having ships made from metal versus ships made from alloy. The alloy ones are noticeably more delicate. It doesn't seem like that much of a difference. If you look at a metal beam, for instance, 1680 health, 40 armor, that doesn't seem to be hugely different from 1440 health and 35 armor. It adds up. It very much adds up. Alloy is a little bit like heavy armor in that it is amazingly good material provided you use it correctly, and the best use of alloy is to put it where it doesn't get shot at immediately. That's metal's job, because it is built for that. So, alloy is fantastic when used correctly. It's not the first block that should be shot off. Like, there's problems with that. Also with the fact that it's so buoyant that if you make entire ships out of it, losing too many blocks on one side like causes it to roll or pitch funny. So yeah, that is a problem. It is expensive armor. Yeah, for what it actually does. But the shields, that is pretty much on point. So well done there, Mean Machine. Moving on to EMP, this is also pretty much spot on. Heavy armor has an EMP reduction value of 0% per meter. This is useful for redirecting EMP currents to your surge protectors instead of spamming them all over your vehicle. EMP will take the path of least resistance, and so it prefers heavy armor over anything. This can be easily integrated into your ship's hull at little cost. To save weight, consider using slopes. Note that placing rubber at the end of these conduits may seem like a good idea, but now the conduit will have resistance on it. So, interact test, and zap. You see right there. EMP surge successfully deflected to the surge protectors right there. So, this is pretty much spot on. The one nitpick is that, according to the people I have watched and spoken to about EMP, technically, like, this isn't wrong. EMP will take the path of doing the most damage, rather than the path of least resistance. Effectively, it's the same thing. It's just that generally, yeah, like, it'll try to do as much damage as possible. The thing is, it doesn't count the EMP resistance of its target block. But effectively what you see here, that is spot on, that works just fine. And in fact, I am guilty of not using this trick enough. It is very handy for saving your AI components and your other stuff that is vulnerable to EMP. So, well done, Mean Machine. That is spot on. This is probably one of my favorite parts about this thing. I didn't know some of this right here. Stealth. Kunk, or Chunk, of my FA20. Find the full jet on my workshop page. Shameless plugin. As a YouTuber, I approve. This is the rear right of a stealth fighter jet. As you can see, it is made of alloy and the engine is covered in control surfaces. Why? Because this makes it stealth. Alloy has the lowest radar and sonar signature than any other material, but why? Control surfaces? Well, alloy block jets from working, but control surfaces do not. Jets and propellers and most internal parts have massive radar and sonar signatures, but a control surface doesn't. There are a few other blocks that don't block jets, but they don't block their signature either. Plus, control surfaces have good HP and armor. Why should you care about radar and sonar signatures? Well, first of all, this will require a smaller missile decoy, and second, if it is on a small and fast vehicle, the enemy will have difficulty seeing it. Sometimes, enemy missiles will target their own shooter instead of your vehicle, which is hilarious to watch. That is, like, very handy to know, and very good to know when making any kind of, stealthy thing. This, by the way, is where alloy is really handy for making fast maneuverable flying things, because it means you'll need less power to move the thing around because it's lighter, and also less to change its course of direction, which is important. I have seen people in the past say you might as well make it out of metal. Because it's so much heavier, it has more momentum once it gets moving. It's exactly as fast, but it takes more to get it to change direction, which means the thing is less maneuverable. So yeah, I did not know about the control surface thing. I have tested this, and that is exactly correct. And the control surface doesn't actually matter that much, whether it's these essentially ready-built ones or the custom ones. They both reduce radar signature by a significant amount if you cover your jets in them. An important thing to note as well is that the ducts do not reduce radar signature. I gave that a little test, so you have to stick the control surfaces on the outside. Just a little note that these tailplanes, these do not have particularly good armor or health. 300 health, 20 armor is not very, very good, but the custom control surfaces do have considerably more health and armor. They're also like heavier as well, which is a bit of a bummer, but yeah, that's how it goes. So yeah, this excellent stealth. I learned things from this fortress. That's a great thing about From the Depths. It doesn't matter what level a player is at. There's always the potential to learn something from them. So thank you, Mean Machine. I am now going to duct tape fins all over my custom jets from now on. Alright, moving right along. We have Flack Seawards. Whoops. Flak guns are great for intercepting enemy missiles and crams. Flak damage is HE with a large radius, but reduced AP. The reduced AP value makes it almost useless against any vehicle with even the thinnest of armor. One big flak explosion will do more damage than many smaller ones, but make sure the big explosion is not overkill. Flak Seawards is good versus swarms of missiles because the damage is dealt fully to each missile it hits. The guns do not have to be accurate and keep the muzzle velocity above 600 meters per second, and a timed fuse is mandatory. When designing shells, use as little parts as possible to maximize the gauge. That is all pretty much a-okay, hunky-dory, except for that last bit, which is debatable. It depends on what kind of shell you want to use. With flak shells, almost certainly you want them bigger rather than smaller. But with other shells, particularly kinetic shells, like having them be long, it actually is very, very handy. And also, if you want a shell to be fast, mostly gunpowder requires a lot more shell length. So that last bit depends on what you're trying to do. The rest of it, spot on. So I tend not to use Flak Seawards that often. I'm just not in the habit of it. I should probably do it more. It is also worth mentioning, since it's not mentioned in this fortress, that against really big missiles, Kinetic Seawards is the way to go. And particularly, it's a weird big gun. Flak Seawards good against small missile. Small gun kinetic Sea Whiz, good against bigger missiles. So it is kind of funny how, like, twisty-turny around that is. I also sometimes mix Kinetic and Flack. That's probably not a good idea, so I don't really recommend it, but also I tend to get better results with it, so what do I know? I need to play more with that. So, Flack Sea Whiz, tick! Well done, that's spot on. And here's where... what is this? Ah, this is just a little thing talking about how... oh, right, interesting. This is an armor formula by the looks of it, so... weight 5, buoyancy plus 33, RS signature plus 2, HP times armor equals 10,000. I'm not sure what this actually is talking about, because it doesn't appear to say anywhere. So... aha! Oh, this is talking about, like, the difference between heavy armor and metal. You get 1 heavy armor block for 5 metal blocks, by the looks of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Generally, stacked metal better than a single layer of heavy armor, unless you're trying to save space, which is important. And yeah, I've already talked about, like, how it depends on what you're trying to do exactly. Alloy is better in a lot of circumstances, but for just as armor, metal is generally better, just because that extra health and armor actually goes a long way. Especially against high explosive damage, as it turns out. That 40 AP, just 5 more than alloy, has a noticeable difference, and the higher health also means that it requires a bigger explosion to even damage metal, so metal makes better armor, so, and alloy just has a bunch of other uses instead. Alright, so sticky flares and radar decoys. Flares are extremely useful for any vehicle. Missiles are the most powerful weapons in the game, but also the most easily countered. Your craft has a radar signature in each direction that is visible from the build menu. Scroll click top right, so they're referring to this. These are the things here. My middle mouse button is broken, so this is on mouse 3 for me. You want your decoy strength to be at least twice as large than your vehicle signature. Like, that's not a hard and fast rule, but I think that's a very good guideline. If you have a heat signature of more than 500, then add some light heat decoys. Do not mix decoys, do add sticky flares. Well, I think that's meant to say do not add sticky flares and radar decoys to the same missile, it is a waste. You can control these decoy launchers with an ACB or a Sea Whiz controller. ACBs can control multiple from anywhere in your vehicle, but they will not conserve flares. Using a Sea Whiz controller is recommended because you can make the flares ignore useless targets like the enemy's flare or out-of-fuel missiles. Interesting. Not sure how you do that. Presumably it's shown. Use ejectors. Reverse launch pad adds 20 meters per second ejection speed. Use missile stagger add-on. I did not know that last bit, the reverse missile thing. Let's see here. Let's see. Let's check these Sea Whiz settings. Ignore inside speed. Alright, so if it... that's... okay, that's clever. I like that. Ignore outside this distance. Interesting. I usually chuck my flares out much earlier than that, but Ignore outside type of projectile. Yep. Ignore outside altitude. It's interesting. It's just... it doesn't make a difference, but whether ignoring inside or ignoring outside really just depends on, like, your preference there. I tend to do ignore outside. But yeah, and this, I'm guessing, is... oh, hello. Hello, this is not set up correctly. Oh, well. And we can do that. Whoops. Ah, no, that's not set to activate. Gotcha. Alright, so well done. Tick, tick, tick. Alright, over here, missile interceptors. Here's where I didn't learn anything, but I got reminded of a thing I should always do. Missile interceptors are easy to build and very compact. However, they are very expensive and not cost-effective in large amounts. An interceptor is good versus a group of targets, as it will damage all missiles and crams near it when it explodes. It has to get close to a missile and fast. Interceptors must turn quickly and move quickly to be effective. They can be used to intercept missiles in the air and torpedoes in the water. They require munition detectors because they do not have eyes of their own. Longer missiles do not do more damage, only the warhead will do damage to other missiles. Correct. It is a good point to note is that I'm a bad boy when it comes to missile interceptors. I tend to overdo them. Really, you should not go nuts with them, and beyond a certain size, you should switch, but beyond a certain amount, I should say, you should use medium ones rather than small ones, because small ones, particularly huge swarms of small missiles, are very, very laggy. Even my computer, which is a pretty decent one, like my computer specs are on the about page of my channel, by the way. I never remember them off the top of my head. Even my box lags when too many small missiles are in play. So, like, if you're running on a potato, you probably shouldn't use them at all. And what I keep forgetting is that turning thrusters are a thing. I consistently forget about them, so that's bad of me. And thank you, Mean Machine, for reminding me that I should use them, because they're very good. And last but not least, we have heat and radar decoys. Oh, I forgot to mention. Right here, missiles being the most powerful weapons in the game. Debatable. It depends on what you mean by powerful. In terms of material per damage done, missiles are too expensive to be the most powerful. I tend to think of as crams as the most objectively powerful in terms of damage numbers, simply because you can make them do really high damage numbers for comparatively little cost, and also they have almost as many counters as missiles do, if not more simple ones. But that's I don't know, like, you can debate amongst yourselves like how true that statement is, because missiles are definitely very powerful. Okay, back on topic. Heat, radar decoys, and chaff emitters. Heat and radar decoys are a low-cost alternative to missile decoys. They are much more powerful, but it will not last you the entire fight, as they will get shot down very quickly. Obviously, you do not want to place these in the middle of your vehicle, because they attract missiles directly to the block. Place them in a useless part of your build, like the superstructure that you think looks cool but doesn't. Ouch, no need to call me out like that, Mean Machine. Chaff emitters can increase the error of missiles, causing them to miss. It is a good idea to build whatever is holding the decoys as small as possible. The one in the example could survive multiple volleys. Seriously. Chaff emitters do not need to be next to the decoys. Chaff emitters eat mats materials like no tomorrow, so use ACVs to control them. Correct. So this little example here, I'm not sure what this is, if this is a complete boat or not. I think it is. Wait a minute. This is a complete boat. What's in here? Oh, that is adorable. This whole thing is a complete craft. I love it. I love it to bits. But anyway, so correct. And one thing that I would like to add on to here is that these things, these heat decoys and radar decoys in particular, are amazing when you mount them on spin blocks. So where is it? Like, I'm not going to load in the thing, but I've done a video ages ago about spin block decoys. Set up correctly, they are amazingly powerful, and they just pull entire swarms of missiles off target. So that is a handy thing to add on to that. And that's basically it for this defense concept guide. Thank you again, Mean Machine, for making this. A lot of new players struggle to wrap their heads around this. Goodness knows, it took me ages to get in the habit of using all of these different concepts all together, because in From the Depths, it's combined concepts that really win the game for you. It's not just being really good at one thing, it's being, like, really good at, like, a few things, but competent enough at, like, most of them that'll enable you to, like, beat the campaigns on harder difficulties, or do well in tournaments, or play through adventure mode, or stuff like that, the harder parts of this already hard game. So thank you very much, and thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon or YouTube membership if you like. It really helps, and there's fun perks in it for you. Thank you to all my current supporters, and I will see you next time in From the Depths, Weird and Wonderful. Please keep making fortresses like this, Mean Machine. Like, the community will actually be grateful. Like, you know, they will be, trust me. Farewell!